Oh my God. It's a surreal feeling. We did it. We did it! Oh my God, we did it.
They did do it. Good morning and welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Claudia Bellafato coming to you live from the DraftKings Network studio in Boston. We have a championship effort for you guys here today. I cannot believe anybody at our DraftKings home studio came into work today in the city of Boston. I figured they'd all still be climbing up ungreased telephone poles in the streets because the Boston Celtics are your 2024 NBA champions, your 18-time now banner-hanging champions in the world of men's professional basketball. We got a great show where we will break that all down today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Claudia, I'd ask you to tell us what's coming up on the rest of the show today, but I kind of feel like I have an idea.
Well, just so everyone knows, we will get to other sports happenings in the world, but yes, we'll see. We have 2 hours, guys. Come on. Coming up on the show, yes, they did it. Celtics secure banner 18 to the streets. This is going to be fun. Reaction from fans outside of TD Garden after the game. And the Wilder side, we'll get some more Boston love in here as Charlotte Wilder joins us in hour 2. So yes, a 16-year drought is over. All-time winningest franchise. Boston fans just get that much more annoying.
You know what? Your words, not mine. As the rest of the country braces for impact on this, Dad, this championship outcome had felt fairly obvious for a while, and last night really just the cap on that in a game where the Celtics were really never challenged as we got into the second quarter and beyond. Almost a 20-point lead maintained the entire time, and in terms of championship celebrations, such a true coronation for this team in the way they were able to go about hanging that first banner since the Garnett and Paul Pierce, Ray Allen Celtics of the early 2000s, and doing it with this core, the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown-led core. Jaylen Brown, your finals MVP for this squad, that so many people had wanted to break up all along the way, that so many people expressed doubts about, despite the fact that these guys were still so young and growing into themselves. What impressed you most about what you saw finally get across the finish line last night?
Me being in basically team sports my entire life, the fact that they did it as a team. This was one of the pure team wins. We were saying, oh my God, if Jaylen Brown is the MVP, is all of a sudden going to be his team? No, it's not. Jason Tatum's still the best player on this team. He shows that, but they are one of the most teams that don't keep mentioning the stars, because they have stars, but they have the other guys that can fill up the stat sheet as well. The ball movement, I still say, you want to call me the old man and just loving the fundamentals of whipping the ball around. But you know what? You know what that did? It got him a title by them playing that way, playing team ball, playing unselfish ball. That to me was the key here. They were just the better team than everybody all year. I know we started talking about, well, the other teams in the Eastern Conference lost their top players. I get it. And you know what? That happens. They still did what they were supposed to do. They ended up going 16-3. one team what did better. That was Golden State in 17, 18 when they went 16-1, one of those years or whatever. I mean, they did what they needed to do, and they did it as a team. So I'm the symmetry of Brown and Tatum. Brown in 2016 was the 3rd pick overall. Tatum in 2017 was the 3rd pick overall.
Both names have a Y in it.
See, there you go. And we'll get into the building of this team, what Brad Stevens had done. So I really enjoyed this one because I can use the word team a lot on where they hung. And this is one of those you talk about when you have somebody on the verge of defeat, take the wind out of their sails. And that's exactly what Boston did, right? 10-point lead after the first quarter, 21-point lead at halftime off a Pritchard 49-footer, at the buzzer, which is something he does anyway, but still the longest shot in NBA Finals history in the last 25 years. So they just took the wind out of the sails to the point where, I don't know what the conversation will. Hopefully somebody will ask for Dallas. What was the conversation at halftime? You're down 21 in this thing. I'm sure it was all positive, one basket at a time, get back into this thing. And they actually won the last 2 quarters by a point and 2 points, but it didn't matter because it was over.
Yeah, I don't know what the conversation could have been because that looked like a team on the court in Dallas that kind of knew what was happening.
Absolutely.
Felt themselves getting swallowed up and pulled out into the riptide. And part of that has to do, we talked about whose team this was for so much of this season. And Jaylen Brown, I think deservedly gets the finals MVP.
Agreed.
We talked the other day about what an overwhelming betting favorite he had become by the time we got to Game 5 of the series. But last night was the Jason Tatum show. Last night, 31 points, 8 rebounds, 11 assists. Jason Tatum becomes the 6th champion in NBA history to lead his team in playoff points, rebounds, and assists, joining LeBron James, Larry Bird, Nikola Jokic, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Tim Duncan. So rarefied air for him. And we talked about this in their last 2 wins. So obviously abstaining the 4th game in Dallas. When Jason Tatum realizes I am bigger and faster and stronger than everybody else, the entire game changes. And it is simultaneously this great thunder punch for a Boston Celtics team that you said is so complete, but also, Dad, I'd imagine a little bit frustrating to some people of why that doesn't seem to happen more often with a player who is that physically capable. And you saw last night when it matches and pairs with that determined attitude, and you saw him going down towards the basket, flexing on people, letting them know if that guy's there all the time, that's the league MVP because talent-wise, it's always been there.
Yeah, and that was his game, going down into the paint. He was only, 1 of 7 from 3, so he wasn't hitting the deep shots. But, it is a guy who does seem to realize what he can do when he wants to do it. And, man, he can do it with authority. It's impressive. I don't know if I can sit here and say, boy, it's got to build confidence. I don't know how I wasn't confident already. But
I don't know either, but it doesn't seem to show up like that as often as you would want to. Claudia, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Now, we also have to have a conversation at some point about the post-game celebration. These are getting out of hand. These are getting out of hand. I mean, I don't know who, if he wrote that out before or what have you, but Claudia, on a scale of 1 to 10, from an excited Celtics fan who's pumped to see this team here, how do we feel about the Jason Tatum interview with Lisa Salters after the game?
Excitement-wise, 10, of course. That's what we wanted to see all season. What was actually said, it felt maybe a little too calculated. But listen, you had 18 losses in the regular season. You had 2 losses coming into this series in the postseason. He knew what he was going to say because he had a feeling he was going to get here. And that's why they didn't really care about the Game 4 loss. And he said he didn't care about MVP. All of that is true because he knew it is his team in the end. He's going to get that microphone. And so, of course, guys, And I get it. I grew up watching the Big Three with the Celtics. It made more sense when Garnett had his whole spiel, and I feel like Tatum was trying to reenact that. So, of course, it's going to be cringy in its own right, but I can't say I'm not excited.
So I'm glad you said it.
It is going to be cringy in its own right, but I will say this, and I'll ask you this, Mike. Now, it's something we can't go back and redo, but there was almost the possibility of it. That was their first championship. And so they put a microphone in their face not long after the game. I'm just trying to think of you when you guys played Alabama. You're a 21, 22-year-old guy. And if you had won that game and on the field a microphone got stuck in front of you, do you think you would have been wax, poetic on your lines?
No, I'm not asking you to wax poetic. I'm asking you to maybe be in the moment a little bit more.
Okay, well maybe that was his moment to recreate a previous moment of a title.
I'm just saying it was awkward. I'm just saying it was awkward. And I didn't enjoy it.
I think it's awkward because we haven't heard him talk like that. He's
No,
very monotone after every press conference, whether they win or lose. You can't tell based off of how he reacts. So this is the first time we've heard him go to that sort of decibel with his voice. I feel like that alone's weird.
I'm not trying to sit here and dunk on the dude. He just won a championship and got the monkey off his back. Like, life is great right now. It was just a funny little moment. I feel like we can all point out the funny little moment when the funny little moment happens in the middle of a series that wasn't all that exciting. Like, that's the other part of this is it's an incredible championship team. And, Dad, I think it's going to be fascinating how history remembers this Celtics team because they were dominant, wire to wire. This is a very rare instance of the team that was the absolute best in the NBA during the regular season, going out and leaving zero doubt in the postseason. The road to this championship through the Eastern Conference is worth being a discussion point, not in the sense that it detracts from the championship at all, but just colors the full picture of, hey, this is what happened this season and this is what went on. And the Celtics, who had, and I think this is their overwhelming superpower, was they were, for the most part, healthy and deep at all the right times of the year. And that depth that they built up that you mentioned, Brad Stevens gets a ton of credit for. Joe Mazzulla gets a ton of credit for. Finding ways to make guys stars in their role all throughout this team. Like, I think if you really want to, because we're going to talk about Al Horford, and him finally getting a championship. Jason Tatum said, that's my favorite teammate of all time. There were a whole bunch of guys in there that were happy for Al Horford. But when I think of this Boston Celtics team and what really embodies what they were, I think of Drew Holiday. I think of a guy who came in and he called himself a utility player. He said, I don't know the pressure on me that Jalen and Jason have, but Drew Holiday coming in and starring in his role every night, no matter what it is. And we hear that term all the time, star in your role, for the guys that are going to be the alsos outside of the stars, the others that Shaq calls them. Drew Holiday is a superpowered other. We've seen him now win championships at two different spots, and him coming in immediately helping continue to set the defensive tone that was such a hallmark for this team early in this series, stepping up and piling points on the board. Drew Holiday is the name that comes to mind. As Kristaps Porzingis, who you could argue was more important to the change of the Celtics team in the regular season in terms of what he did to the chemistry of the team, I still think Drew Holiday speaks to exactly what this Boston's team's identity was.
Porzingis, by the way, did play 16 minutes, only scored a couple of points in this one, a few points in this one, is going to have surgery now. He said he just wanted to be on the field. He was concerned, or on the court, was concerned about possibly injuring it more, but wanted to be out there for this.
The reception he got from the crowd, too, incredible. Was unbelievable.
And that's an athlete. You know, you expect someone like that, as we always say, players want to play. You know, they have to be taken off the court by somebody else, and he wanted to play here. But you're right about Drew Holiday and what he does. And that's maybe one of the things that really turns me on to this team is the way they play defense.
They turn you on?
They do, yeah. The way they play defense, the way they move the ball. I'll keep saying it. Listen, Dallas, again, averaged 117 points a game. They didn't score over 100 in any of the 5 games in this series. So kudos to that Boston defense for it, and the way they moved around the ball on offense, the way they built this team, because this team right now isn't going anywhere. Jason Tatum, gang, is going to sign a $315 million deal. I mean, the money is just getting ridiculous of where it's going, and kudos to all of them. More power to them. Grab it while you can. So I love all the other storylines, from the building of this team to Al Horford, 186 postseason games before he got his title, and just what he means to everybody and how well liked he is. There's just a lot of good storylines to this. Joe Mazzulla, the youngest coach to win a title since Wilt coached this team back in the 60s.
And you want to talk about post-game interviews. Joe Mazzulla did the normal one last night. He got interviewed on stage and he sounded happy. It's like he finally was able to let the guard down after the job was done and go out here and enjoy this like everybody else. I was so excited for Joe Maz at that point, man. He got to be a human.
And again, this wasn't a team that caught fire at the right time. This is one of 7 teams in the history of the NBA to have at least 55 wins and outscore your opponents by over 10. So, I mean, they did it the entire year. They were the best team the entire year. The only thing that Claudia and other Boston Celtic fans were worrying about was, are they going to choke in the playoffs again after being the team they're going to be? And then along the way, of course, that gets fueled by, oh, yeah, you won. You didn't sweep, and the other team lost their best guy. Oh, it happened again. Oh, it happened again. But this team didn't care about the outside noise, just kept playing. And now odds-on favorite to do again next year, and they should be. They absolutely should be the way they've been playing.
No, I think the one interesting thing with this Celtics team is going to be, and looking back on it, I'm trying to think their road through the Eastern Conference Finals. Claudia, who do they play in the first series in the Eastern Conference playoffs this year? I know they ended up beating Miami, then they beat Indiana. And was there someone else that I'm missing in the midst of this?
Cavs, yeah, because Donovan.
Cleveland.
Yeah.
So the one thing that will be interesting, and I think timed up well for them in terms of this Boston team getting that monkey off their back of, they had choked in the postseason, done all that. And I know Miami had kind of been the hang-up for them, so Jimmy Butler's injury looms pretty large. That had been the team that was the thorn in their side. But even in terms of coming out of the West, they didn't have to face a team that was a former champion, right? They didn't have to face a team that had been to a place that they hadn't before. The Celtics had the high ground, especially when it got to the finals, of team that had been to this stage before, team that had an overwhelming amount of postseason experience. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, now the most playoff games career by a duo before winning an NBA title. And so all of that experience, I think, especially relative to the teams that they face, really helped them be able to avoid getting into that spot where all of a sudden you clam up and start to worry when the going gets tough.
Yeah.
And the going never really got tough.
No, it never really got tough. They had the one clunker when they could have swept it when they were in Dallas, and they didn't. And they're probably happy they won it on their home court.
Secretly, it looked a lot more fun to win that in Boston last night. That looked like a college, and I say this in the nicest way possible. That looked like a college celebration.
I agree. The fans didn't want to leave the Garden. I mean, it was just I love watching celebrations. That's one of the more favorite parts. The only problem is how quickly they have everybody is celebrating. And celebrating hard, especially into today. And Derek White's going to have to go to the dentist. So, I mean, what a horrible thing to have to think. I love all the dentists out there for what you do, but I hate the dentist. I hate going to the dentist. And Derek White going to have to go see the dentist.
You're not good at the dentist like me.
No,
my dental hygiene's A1.
No, even if I have a good visit, I don't like the dentist.
Yeah, I don't feel like you've had a lot of good visits though in there. You've had a lot of work done on your mouth. You've had a lot of things that have gone wrong.
I didn't really wear a mouthpiece when I played ball. That was probably not the smartest thing in the world.
And neither did Derek White.
Well, he did. He got rid of it then, right?
He said he did. He tossed the mouthpiece away, and he said, I would lose all my teeth for a championship. If he missed it, there was a sequence in the middle of this game that did also kind of embody the Celtics team. The ball hit the mat, and their bodies were flying everywhere.
For the ball.
And Derek White goes full Superman dive to try and push the ball out so that Jaylen Brown can take it on a fast break and go do his thing. And right as that happens, one of the Mavericks players rolls over the top, lands directly on the back of his head, and smacks it right off the hardwood in the floor. He got up, was bleeding from the mouth and all that. And to his credit, didn't go out and didn't miss a ton of time. It was very hockey player-esque, which we don't get a lot of in the NBA postseason. My question to you, though, is, Dad, that smile, now one of the indelible marks and images of this finals for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
If you're Derek White, you leave it for the parade? Go out there and flash that cracked smile one time?
I don't think so, because we've all gone through this, or I know I have, and maybe not everybody, but you start to mess with it with your tongue, right? You feel with your tongue, and then all of a sudden you get your tongue torn up. And now you got two things. Now you got the tooth, and now you got your tongue, because you can't help but rub your tongue over the part of your mouth that's not supposed to be that way. So you keep rubbing your tongue over it, and then you got a sore on your tongue, and you got a chipped tooth. I'm going to hell to the dentist and getting that thing fixed. Fixed is where I'm going. And I'm stunned he didn't Mbappe the thing and break his nose. I mean, because his face went flat into the parquet floor. I thought for sure he was going to bust his nose, and someone landed on top of him. And so he just got a chipped tooth out of it, threw his mouthpiece to the sideline, smiled, showed his chipped tooth, and it was a great moment. I was like, way to go, man. Good move.
And I have to say, between him saying he'll lose all of his teeth, Porzingis saying he would die to go play in that game instead of getting surgery, which he will need now. I don't know, man. If you want to say this team doesn't have dog in them, I feel like at least those two guys do.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, they've got a little bit of lunatic in them because, again, leadership starts at the top. And you look at Joe Mazzulla, who's showing them UFC fight videos of guys getting choked out. They're all talking about what a sicko he is and the clips that he shows them before games. So this team very much, I think, reflects the people that built it in Brad Stevens, who obviously helped create a lot of the depth, but also reflects coaching. And you mentioned Joe Mazzulla, the youngest coach to win in the NBA Finals. I saw guys that I realized He's 35. He's a year older than I am, so was playing college basketball when I was in school.
Amazing.
And now just led this team and this storied franchise to their 18th banner, much to the chagrin of Magic Johnson, former Lakers great, who came out and in only purely Magic Johnson fashion said, "I'm so mad that the Boston Celtics have more championships than us."
Oh, they talk about rivalries and love and rivalry. So, all right, I'll leave you with this. Jaylen Brown, 2016, number 3 pick overall, your MVP of the finals. There was a tweet poll that he tweeted back in 2014, so 10 years ago. And his tweet was, "My teacher said she will look me up in the Cobb County Jail in 5 years." Wow. That was his tweet 10 years ago of what one of his teachers thought of him. And it's right in the background is a picture of him holding up the MVP trophy.
Boy, I will be waiting on that Jaylen Brown Instagram caption with bated breath with that in the background. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics, your 2024 world champions. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the other side of this coin, the Dallas Mavericks, and what's next for this core heading into the 2024-25 season.
Into GoJo and Golic. Yes, we are going to continue talking about the Celtics, the fact that they won, but this time we're going to go to the Mavs side of things because, yes, I think it's an accomplishment that they got here as the 5 seed, but there's been a lot of talk about Luka Doncic, and yes, maybe he's one of the best offensive players in the league, but defense left a lot to be desired. With that said, we have to applaud him for leading the league in points, rebounds, assists, and steals during a postseason with 41 steals in that. That was despite suffering a right knee sprain in the first round, a contusion in the finals opener where he had to get those injections. So applauds to him for sure. Here's what he had to say about playing hurt.
It doesn't matter if I was hurt. How much was I hurt? I was out there, tried to play, but I didn't do enough.
Well, he's one of the best players in the world, and so I think the biggest thing for him is that we all, would like to be healthy, but there's going to be bumps and bruises along the way. And so for him at the age of 25 to get to the finals, to be playing his basketball at the level that he's playing is just, being consistent.
In this final series, he averaged over 29 points, almost 9 rebounds, and over 5.5 assists. And Senior, you said it throughout this series. When I mentioned Luka's injuries, you said nobody's 100% healthy at this point. So I think moving forward, let's talk about the chemistry of this team, the makeup of this team, and Luka himself. What do you guys see for the future of him, Senior?
So I think, and I like what he said there. And you go on the court, there's no, well, I'm hurt on the court. I'm on the court. So the expectation is you play well. And he said, I didn't do enough. So I like hearing that. We call that way back in the day. So still today, you wear the hat. Wear the hat of responsibility. I'm on the court. Doesn't matter what the injury is. I got to go play. I think for them, Mike, they have him and Kyrie. And Kyrie has obviously been in the league a lot longer, and they talk about building a championship team together. It's kind of a double-edged sword is they rely so much on Luka and Kyrie, but really Luka, that you'd like to get him more rest. And I don't mean necessarily play less, but not have to do everything on the court all the time. Now, sometimes he's his own worst enemy because he hangs onto the ball. So he is initiating the fact that I'm going to have the ball, so I'm the center of this play, and I'm going to do something with this ball, as opposed to others taking it, him kind of be able to catch his breath a little bit. He doesn't really do a lot of that, and I wonder if that's something that's going to have to happen. Because if he wears down and gets injured, we see what the reaction is. So that would be kind of my thought process. Like I said, though, even though it's a double-edged sword, because dude loves to hang on to the ball.
So I think this postseason run and really everything from the trade deadline on this year is an opportunity for kind of a fork in the road for Luka, right? Because I think what you've said is true. He's traditionally been one of the most ball-dominant players, but also one of the most skilled. And I think I'd imagine, I've never been a player of that caliber, but for guys like that, it's got to feel like the surest hands are my own. You have trouble letting go and letting other people go and try and do this when you know they're not as capable and talented as you, and that's got to be a difficult thing. We saw a breakthrough with that this year. Kyrie Irving and what he meant alongside Luka Doncic, someone that he did trust at times. We saw it in this postseason run to take the reins for a little bit so Luka could recharge. And you saw them when they were at their best, getting other guys involved here, Likely, Gafford, all the names that we talked about, PJ Washington through this postseason run that made this Mavericks team great. And then we saw a little bit of regression when we got to the finals in the first few games of this, somewhat because of the Boston Celtics defensive effort. I want to give them the appropriate amount of credit for that.
Without question.
Turned them back into Kyrie and Luka iso ball. And so from here on out for Dallas and for the Mavericks, if they're going to get over the hump, it's going to have to be because they made the choice that that's who they want to be more often now going forward, is a team where the star player trusts his supporting cast enough to let them in for the moments they're going to make them great. Because on the other side, we saw exactly that. We saw a Celtics team that had so many of those guys that were empowered by the situation, empowered by their stars, and empowered by their coach to go out there and feel like they could impact the game time and time again when needed.
Completely agree. So what's going to change for Dallas? Is Luka going to change all of a sudden? Luka and Kyrie? I mean,
we saw him change some this year in that regard. We saw him let his co-star in more than he had let others. And we also saw, and I understand this might sound funny coming off of finals where this was so much of a story early on, but we also saw him. Like, there are statistics that we read on this show to prove that Luka Doncic was playing better defense down the last 20 games of the season and into the playoffs when they were one of the best defensive teams in basketball going up against non-Boston Celtic juggernauts.
And you also saw, he even said, no excuse, he's on the court being hurt, while a lot of people are as well, but other teams take advantage of it, right? They went right at him, right around him.
The same way Dallas did when Kristaps was on the floor.
Absolutely right, and that's what you're supposed to do. But I guess that's my point, is trying to keep Luka out of that situation by being the dominant guy all the time. Because, listen, he did defer to Kyrie at some times, and unfortunately Kyrie was inconsistent. We'd see him get 20.5, we'd see him get 5.5. We'd see him shoot poorly. We'd see him shoot great. So there wasn't enough consistency, and God forbid, especially in Boston.
Well,
that was the tough part.
It was, and I guess that'll be the sticking point. Like I said, this is a fork in the road where is what happened in the finals going to be a deterrent now, where Luka Doncic internalizes and said, hey, when I tried to turn the reins over, the other guy wasn't ready to take and holster that load the way I thought he was on that stage. Is that going to make him pull back and say, hey, sure, his hands are my own, I have to do this? Or can there still be this admission that, hey, it was one bad series, and it was a series that for Kyrie was deeply personal? Like, there's no running from how the Celtics of all this affected Kyrie Irving throughout the series. We saw him responding to the crowd early on in the series. We saw him struggle. And part of that is, hey, he's a smaller guy, one of the most creative finishers in the history of the NBA. We heard LeBron James on Mind the Game call him the most gifted player in the history of the league. He ran into a bunch of bigger, faster, stronger defenders who made his life a living hell.
You saw, his handle is ridiculous, and you saw him the ability to get to the basket, but then unfortunately, that Boston defense was basically denying him at the basket. So we'll see where they go. I compare it again to the NFL, where the AFC is deeper, the Western Conference is deeper, right? You have Denver, you have Dallas, you have Oklahoma City, you have Minnesota. And for Luka, now I'm sure the team would like him to take a pass, but he even said, I don't want to talk about the immediate future, because the next question is he going to play for Slovenia in the Olympics? Because they have qualifying games against Greece July 2nd to get into the Olympics. So I don't know how the roster works. I don't know if he can not play and see if they get qualify and get into it and then play, because he was beat up. And July 2nd, last I checked, is about 14 days away. Yeah. So I don't know if, and again, you need to win these games to get into the Olympics. So I don't know if he's going to be playing in those. I don't know if he'll be available to play in those or how it's going to work. But this is something we'd run into when the pros first started going to the Olympics, is all of a sudden owners are like, well, wait a minute, man. What if my guy gets hurt? My star gets hurt. And we've realized we've done it for years now. We dominate. But for Luka and other guys that play for not the United States, play for their team, where Slovenia is not going to, I don't really think, challenge for the gold in this thing, but it's still the pride of playing for your country in the Olympics, which I talk about all the time, of how cool it's got to be.
Well, and for Luka, who started his professional career, obviously the world outside of the NBA is real to Luka in a way that for some guys, especially American-born players, it probably isn't. And I'm sure international basketball can mean something different for everybody. But you're right. The pride of representing your country, even if it's not a group that's favored to win by any stretch of the imagination, I think is a very real factor for a team. You talk about next year, the Dallas Mavericks, right now, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, the 6th best odds going into next year to win the NBA championship. Boston obviously leads the way at plus 290, followed by the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Timberwolves from the Western Conference, and then the Milwaukee Bucks as the other Eastern Conference team representing, before you get to the Dallas Mavericks at plus 1,000. So, Dad, this is a team that, it's not like the Boston Celtics going into next year, or even teams like Denver and Oklahoma City, where you go, all right, well, they're so deep, they're so young, they've got time to pick right up where they left off. For Dallas, it's very much we talked about it, fork in the road of, all right, are they going to continue on this trajectory and challenge a lot of these great Western Conference teams, or could Luka limp into next season literally, and all of a sudden that gets off to a tough start?
And I see it switching amongst the Western Conference teams that make it. I don't know if there'll be a dominant one over the next few years. Real quick, last year's world ranking, Slovenia was 7th in the world.
And I'd imagine they would plummet without Luka Doncic on the court with them. So we'll get plenty more on this series and Boston's championship with Charlotte Wilder joins us in the next hour. But coming up next, new negotiation tactics out in San Francisco from one-star wideout.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. 49ers receiver Brandon Ayuk is taking his contract negotiations quite public. To TikTok, actually. He made a video on Monday talking with Washington Commanders quarterback Jayden Daniels, his former Arizona State teammate. Take a listen.
What? They said they don't want me back. I swear.
Okay, and in case you couldn't hear that, they said they don't want me back. Daniel said, that's it. He said, I swear. And then in the caption, he wrote, I'm laughing, but I'm crying for real. Enters his final year of his rookie contract, slated to count $14.124 million against the salary cap in 2024. So, I mean, not to sound like Captain Obvious here, but is he insinuating he would be becoming teammates with his old teammate, GoJo? What does this video mean?
Well, I think he would love that to be the insinuation here, because again, when you've got an interaction like this filmed by a dedicated crew to put on social media, something tells me we all talked about this before. Like, this is the day and age where we live in, Dad, where we talk so much about the messages that get sent on social media during contract negotiations or free agency when you see a guy unfollows the team or starts doing something like this. It seems dumb and funny to all of us, but I think at this point it's a very clear part of the playbook that a lot of these guys run during the offseason, as everyone from the team side of people to the players and their agents are trying to win and move the needle in the court of public opinion, trying to create that sentiment. And this is just the latest installment in it now that I'm very much here for. TikTok influencing in NFL contract situations. What a beauty.
Is it tampering if it's two players?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's tampering if no one says anything tampery.
Right.
Like, there was nothing tampery about this. It was just, hey,
insinuating they don't want me.
Listen, it's his friend. It's a guy he was teammates with. He happens to be the quarterback of an opposing team.
I guess I'm just wondering, if they did take it too far, would there be tampering?
Let's put it this way. Based on what we just saw happen to the Atlanta Falcons, I don't think anybody cares about the penalties for tampering anymore. And to be clear, that's the correct approach to this, because the NFL's shown you they don't care, because we all know what's going on and it's silly.
So we all talk about teams that have multiple talent, and we've talked about San Francisco probably having the deepest offensive talent between obviously Christian McCaffrey and Kittle and Debo and Ayuk, who the year he had last year, and Purdy for how well he's playing. So they're going to have to pay Purdy right at some point. You have Debo has 2 years left on his deal. Kittle has 2 years left on his deal. They just extended CMC, so he's got 4 years left on his deal. And sometimes there's only so much money to go around. You see that in Cincinnati, where they tagged T. Higgins. And as we all thought, I'm going to sit there and say I was right. We all thought that, because it just doesn't pay to sit for a year. He was going to play the year on the franchise tag, and he signed the tender, and that's what he's going to do. It's a lot of money. It's $20-some million, nothing to laugh at all. But we understand now why guys don't really like the tag, because it's not cumulative money and guaranteed money over the years. So somebody was going to have to be on the outside. But this guy's first few years in the league have been fantastic. It would be like exactly what you want from somebody in that position to then say, okay, let's pay him, like Justin Jefferson. But Justin Jefferson is kind of, TJ Hawkinson came in, has done well, but Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. There are others on this team that fill the spot. So, as I said, there's only so much money to go around. Ayuk thinks he's way more valuable than what San Francisco thinks from a monetary standpoint. So we'll have to wait and see. He's got this year left on his deal, so he doesn't control anything outside of I'm not reporting, which he didn't to offseason program. He didn't to minicamp, so that'll cost him over $100,000 of him drawing a line and saying, I'm not going to play football for you unless you redo my deal. And unfortunately, that's been a hollow threat by players. You don't see it happen because you just don't pass up $20-some million at the end of the day when that's your choice.
Well, and just the way the fine systems worked out, the way the CBA's worked out for guys that are under contract. To your point, it's different when you're a franchise tag player. And you can avoid. I was surprised T. Higgins, quite honestly, didn't drag that out to camp some, just because guys usually use it as a reason to kind of stay away and hold their feet, just continue to show their displeasure. But you're right. Now he enters in and he's under contract. So, yeah, it's prohibitive for the rest of these guys. I think with Brandon Ayuk, it's just all about how does he view himself in these negotiations in terms of the receivers? Because you mentioned the 49ers have a lot of guys that are long-term contract guys, which means in theory there should be room to play with how you distribute that out and how you structure that to keep your cap hits in a spot that's manageable. Because when you know, hey, we've got guys that we want around for a long time. Nick Bosa on defense. You mentioned the names on offense. Certainly your quarterback and Brock Purdy is going to be a part of that group soon. But where's it got to be? Because production-wise, and I remember this is always the number in the contract and the sea of contracts this offseason for wideouts. Devonta Smith seemed like the one where you looked at a player that was similar in terms of production during their time in the league. Both guys that were former top picks. Devonta Smith, just under $34 million guaranteed at signing in this contract, in a world where we just saw Justin Jefferson get $88.7 guaranteed at signing. I think in that $35 million, between $35 and $40 million guaranteed at signing range for Brandon Ayuk could be the medicine for a player that, like you said, Dad, has steadily improved, gotten better and better each year, had to fish himself out of the Kyle Shanahan doghouse early on in his career, and has now made himself into a player that's very much the Shanahan-McVay receiver, where not only is he a guy capable of going across the middle, yards after catch, but also will go and do the dirty work in, likes getting his hands on guys and blocking. He's become exactly what you want in that offense.
You know, and I always talk about in situations like this, what kind of leverage do you have? And he's played well, and he's done everything you could ask of him to get that next contract, but they have other talent on that team. So the team is like, listen, we got this guy, we got that guy, you know, we can give you this, we got money to deal with and all that, blah, blah, blah. You look over in Cleveland, a guy who may have a little more leverage is Amari Cooper.
Sure.
Right? Amari Cooper, now he's older. I think he's 30. Yeah. He's in the last year of his deal, and he has stayed away from off-season program and the mini camp, but he was the go-to guy amongst the 25 quarterbacks that played last year. You know, and Njoku stepped up as well, but Amari Cooper was that guy, and he is that guy there, so he may have a little more leverage as he's probably trying to get his last good deal, right? 30 years old, so you're probably, you know, getting away from getting that monster deal in the next deal, so you're trying to capitalize on this one. Because if these guys play, you know, if they sit there, I think with Ayuk or whoever it was, they offered a 1-year extension, I think, to Ayuk. And he was like, why would I do that? I'll be in the same position next year. Yep. If I play great, I'm in the same position. If I play bad, they'll hold it against me. So Amari Cooper would be the same way. You don't want to do the 1-year extension where you're just getting a little bit of bump in pay. You want a good deal, especially for Cooper, who's 30, and time for that big contract is running out. So those are two to really keep an eye on.
It's so interesting because this offseason we've seen basically every wide receiver get paid. And we wondered, hey, there's so many good wide receivers that have been coming into the league recently out of college, and there's such a glut of them at this position. I thought somewhere along the line there would be teams that looked around and said, oh, we can do this elsewhere. When you look at a team like San Francisco, who drafted Ricky Pearsall this year, high in the draft coming out of Florida, it kind of sent you a message that maybe they are the ones. Because we talk about this all the time. I mean, you look out right now in the sea of the offseason content cycle, seeing a lot of quarterback rankings. You know what you're not seeing? A lot of Brock Purdy in the top 10 or the top 5. Like most people in the offseason have kind of level set on Brock Purdy that they believe outside of that system is a middle of the road NFL, excuse me, is a upper half of the NFL quarterback, but not in anyone's top 10 or top 5 pretty consistently. And that's the Shanahan effect. It's we look at this offensive structure and play calling as something that elevates so many people. And it didn't affect the guys in Miami in a similar system with Mike McDaniel because they're really fast. And for Brandon Ayuk, who's a great quality receiver, big receiver, maybe not the fastest in the world, you're looking at the original system and going, all right, well, maybe we believe Kyle Shanahan can offset this with a different guy, a cheaper guy, a younger guy, if they don't want to have to pay him. And Brandon Ayuk seems like the one guy that's being penalized for this glut of receiver talent that we talk about.
It is a shame because, as I said, the guy's done everything asked of him. Stats getting better and better, right? You think you should be in position to get paid, and instead, just as you said, 31st pick overall, first round, Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver, Florida, goes to San Francisco. Ayuk's got to be going, really? You know, what are we doing here? I've done everything you've asked from me, yet he looks like it may not happen for him with that big money.
Yeah, we'd love to see it because, again, you want players to get rewarded when they go out there and they accomplish the way you draft them to. But we understand this is a big boy league, and that is not always the case. For Brandon Ayuk, he may be just on the outside looking in.
back here on GoJo and Golic to remind you, while the NBA Finals is over, hockey is still going on, people, and the Panthers could win it tonight. But the Oilers faced elimination on Saturday, and not only did they stay alive, but they did it in a blowout fashion, similar to that Game 4 in the NBA. 8-1 was the final, just the third time in NHL history that a team faced elimination and scored at least 8 goals. Oils winger Ryan Nugent-Hopkins knows his team can build on that performance.
Well, I mean, it's always nice to be able to put some in, obviously, and when you feel like you're getting chances and you're putting a lot of pucks on net and they're not going in, it's always, of course, it's nice to break through a little bit. That doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen tomorrow night. We're going to have to work for it, but if anything, we can take some confidence from the other night.
Wise not to think you can score 8 more on Sergei Bobrovsky. We'll talk about Conn Smythe thoughts in a second. As far as this game goes, though, Panthers are the favorite at -135, and in my mind, it's similar to sort of with the Mavs situation, right?
Yes.
They got that one win. They're all facing elimination, but now you're on the road. It's going to be a tough crowd. I think this is a cheap price on the Panthers given that situation. Curious what you think, Senior.
Well, I think it's exactly like what we saw in the NBA, where that Game 4 was a blowout for the Mavs. Game 4 was a blowout for Edmonton. And the beauty of a series sport like basketball and hockey is each game is different, right? Each game is its own new game, so you can reset. You can have the confidence that says, we got that done. We can go into the next game fresh again, and we can try and do the same thing. But
unless you believe that you can carry things over from one game to the next here, and then in that case, maybe they're tied together.
See, and I don't. I think they're separate games. Do we think Bobrovsky's going to give up? How many goals did he give up before they pulled him and said, go sit? Was it 5 goals or whatever?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen again. So I don't see the carryover there. I see Florida as being the better team, and I see them ending it tonight in 5, just like the Celtics ended the Mavs in 5. So Oilers are the 9th team in NHL history to extend a best-of-7 cup after falling behind 3-0, winning that game. 5 of those teams went on to lose in Game 5, and I think it'll be 6 tonight in Edmonton.
Can we say if they do, and this continues the symmetry between the finals, lazy script writing this season in the postseason?
Yeah.
No one can come up with an original idea. We just decided to copy and paste the storylines for the NBA and the NHL postseason this year.
Because the one thing that would be cool, if they pulled off the win and it went back to Edmonton for Game 6, that would be lights out up there. That'd be very cool to see.
It'd be incredible. And you're looking at, if you're trying to peddle in hope for Edmonton, it would be, hey, all your stars got going in this last game, right? Connor McDavid has 4 points. Your special teams were finally coming online there. You scored a shorthanded goal, which usually is a pretty good sign of things going on for your club. But I saw they had been 0 for 10 on power play settings in the first 3 games of the series. And even in this game, they went 1 for 6. It wasn't like some massive turnabout in that, but to finally see the puck go into the net in that setting, that's one of those things that you do wonder for a group of guys that are already so talented in those goal scorers on Edmonton, where the cell had been offense for them. That was my one question of, maybe is there a carryover for, hey, all right, already incredibly talented group. You've been going up against this otherworldly defense and goalie, banging your head against the wall. And now if you finally see the puck go into the net 8 times in that game, does an already talented group of dudes all of a sudden get that fire back under their ass?
I don't know if it makes any difference. They're going to shoot the same shots if they get the chance, right? I think a lot of this was on Bobrovsky, right? He didn't have a good game. And he's had great games. He didn't have a good game. I don't know if the shots were different. They had more rushes maybe, did Edmonton, but they have the same goal scorers now that they did, during the regular season and in the playoffs to get to this point. I think a lot of times, especially in hockey, a lot of it is on the goalie for the other team. And I think Bobrovsky has been magical, save for that Game 4 where he was bad.
I do want to bring in the Conn Smythe odds here, because heading into that Game 4, Bobrovsky was the overwhelming favorite, right? -550. So at that point, there was no value. This is the time to get him because of that one game, which, yes, it was awful. You gave up 5 goals. I understand that. But +105 to go from -550 to plus money, a little bit of plus money, where he had a Game 1 shutout, just 1 goal allowed in Game 2, 3rd best in goals saved above expected in this postseason. I understand why Barkov is a slight favorite here. He's been pivotal in the series, leading the team in points, all of that. But at even money, But Bobrovsky right now, to get him at plus money after he was minus 550 in that last game, this is the time where you take advantage of that market movement.
Those are the close odds. Those are some of the closest odds I've seen.
It's Bob Money now.
Yeah.
It's Bob Money time. You go out there and get him.
I'd lay it on Bob. If I had to lay it on one of the one's even money, it's not like Bobrovsky's going to make you a ton of money, though, but it's still plus money.
Yeah, more than he was.
I would lay it. I would lay it on him.
Yeah, I think this is one of those you have to remember this is cumulative. And while we're all going to respond strongly to one game there, Bobrovsky has still been the story of this postseason for them. And so I think I agree with you. I'm just kind of stirring the pot a little bit. I think ultimately Florida gets this done. I think we keep the symmetry with the NBA Finals. I think Bobrovsky ends up being your Finals MVP, your Stanley Cup Finals MVP, wins the Conn Smythe, and we ride off into the sunset. So Claudia is the person that's beat the drum for hockey the most on this show and the one who's constantly fought to make sure it's got a place in the lineup here. Do you have any final reflections or predictions for this one? Do you think that we're done with hockey in the NHL after tonight?
I will say, I think it makes a lot more sense if this went back to Edmonton, just because hockey and basketball are two completely different sports, and hockey can change within seconds. Like a 2-goal lead, we've seen that be broken down just within a few seconds. That's very possible, where I don't feel like that's the same reality in the NBA, especially with that series we had with the Mavs in Boston. Because of what you said, Edmonton was one of the most talented offenses throughout this regular season heading into this series. So it would make a lot more sense if this went to Edmonton, and as a hockey fan, I'd love that. As somebody who doesn't want to see Florida win, I would absolutely love that. But I do think Sergei is going to come back and look more like himself. So unfortunately, I do think it ends tonight, but I'll be happy if I'm wrong.
God, I forgot about that other correlation for the script writers there. Two just incredible offensive teams.
Yeah.
So we're talking about. I mean, that was, I think, the forgotten note. I don't know if we got to that or not from last night. That Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, I believe, finished as the highest scoring backcourt duo in NBA playoff history during this run that they were on, and that ended up not being enough. So would, again, be another bit of poetic justice and a tie between these two series to have that group for the Oilers that now, remember, we talked about kind of staring at a cliff next year depending on what happens with the Leon Draisaitl contract situation. Going into the final year of his deal with how productive he's been, can absolutely walk in and demand more. And if not, do they start to move him? And all of a sudden, does this great core of him and Hyman and Nugent Hopkins and obviously Connor McDavid at the helm look a lot different next year after battling so hard just to finally get to this point, to almost get over the hump, to run into a Florida team that, much like their Boston Celtic counterparts, took the pain of, albeit for them, more recent championship loss experience from last year against the Vegas Golden Knights and parlay that into a dominant.
Well, that's why I'd hate to see the change, right? Because you saw what Florida did, getting smoked by the Golden Knights, and now they're gonna hoist Lord Stanley's Cup. So I would like to see, I'm sure a lot of people would like to see Edmonton kind of stay together with what they have now. It's a business. There's contracts. I get it. But you're right there. You made the finals. There's something to be said for that. So all you have to do is look at the team you're playing right across the ice and saying they did the exact same thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it does not seem like that's super likely at this point, but you never know. It'd be interesting to see them get a chance to get back here, because I know, obviously, you've got the undercurrent for everybody north of the border of a Canadian team still, it looks like, going to fall short of winning the Stanley Cup for over 30 years. But I think also the best player, or a guy who's been one of the consensus best players in the sport, in Connor McDavid for so long now, it seems like on the cusp of starting to join that conversation of, will he be one of the best to never win a championship? Is going to get real Charles Barkley-esque up in here.
Or at some point, will he say goodbye to Edmonton down the road, to head somewhere else?
Cup hopping.
Yeah.
We'll find out if that's going to be what it takes. Again, Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final coming up tonight. We'll see if it'll be the final one there, and if anyone is going to get to hang a banner. And coming up next, we will check in with our good buddy Charlotte Wilder, who was there on the scene in TD Garden last night for banner number 18. We'll check in with her next on GoJo Golic.
Welcome into hour 2 of GoJo and Golic. The drought is over. Have no fear, Boston fans. We can rejoice because the second longest championship drought in Boston is over since the Big Four all existed in 1960. Came to an end last night with the Celtics W. Our very own Emerson Latzia took to the streets to get some reaction from the Boston fans.
A little throwback. How we feeling, baby? We're feeling real good, baby. Anything is possible. We have tears. These happy tears. Yeah, absolutely. Banner 18. Where does this rank among all Boston championships? How good does this one feel? This is the one we needed! And you got it! Let's go! Hell yeah, brother! Hell yeah! Give me some of that! Yeah! The wait is over. 16 years. 16 since 7th grade. I'm in college now. I love Jalen. I love Jason. So that was only like 4 years ago then. Yeah, something like that.
But like I said at the top of the show, we're just that much more annoying now.
Wow. I was going to say a couple of things very quintessentially Boston there. A woman getting ready to share her perspective and feelings being drowned out by a bunch of drunk white frat guys seemed like it was very on brand. But I got to pick a bone with our buddy Emerson Latzia there, who had a piece of pizza draped over his mouth and looked like he was going to go after it. And instead basically just licked a little bit of the cheese off, thus not ingesting any of the pizza for himself and ruining the slice for whoever was going to take it after that.
Completely agree. I was not impressed with his biting the dangling pizza, as they say, because it was right there for him.
As they say.
That's
what they say. He would have done a lot better if it was a hot dog. I'll put it that way. Emerson, big glizzy guy.
Here's one thing I will say. The work being done in Boston.
Oh God!
That
is disturbing.
That is okay.
Him tonguing that pizza cannot be PG-13.
No, we can't put that.
That's got to be an R rating.
That cannot be on our work computers at all. Okay, that's God. But the work production in Boston today has to be at an all-time low, right?
Oh,
I mean, oh my God.
Well, you know what? That being said, like, as Claudia raises her hands here wearing Celtics green.
You did, Claudia. Well done.
Claudia, you did show up. And what I will say is, while the jokes there persist about the long championship drought, this is kind of a city that's sort of used to winning championships.
Yeah, it is.
So if anyone should be able to shrug this off and get back to work.
Is that kid going to show up who had the sign?
Oh, you know what? Get that kid out of here. Speaking of championship kids in Boston, we're excited to welcome in our next guest here, the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network. She was in the building last night celebrating her team's big win. Charlotte Wilder, good morning, bud. How you feeling?
Good morning indeed. Oh man, I'm feeling a little crazy. I feel a little crazy. I don't know. It hasn't sunk in yet. Also, I didn't sleep much, so it's like the delirium. And I'm like, did that happen? I think it happened. I think they won. Guys, I cried. I'll be honest. I think that, no, first of all, look, one thing I will say for Boston is that, yes, this is a city used to winning a lot of championships. I don't think they get, I think during the run of a season, it feels like Boston fans are complacent or like entitled, as I've said that, and now I'm like, we're not. But I think that there is an element of once it happens, like, it's not like, oh, cool, they did it again. Like you saw in Emerson's video, it's a big deal, you know? And I think, yeah, is that what you wanted when you said, how are you, Gojo? Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed.
It's a very natural reaction, though, I think, to remember, and as someone that's now the fan of the back-to-back two-time defending champion, men's college lacrosse, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, I understand what you're talking about in the middle of that run getting lost. I guess I would ask then, Shaw, what was it like in TD Garden? Because that's the other thing, is forgetting the outside and the lead up to the moment. How did the actual moment itself that we all knew it was coming, we all figured they were going to win, actually live up to your expectation?
It was incredible. In a blowout, I think you might worry, oh yeah, our fans not going to keep the energy up the whole time. It was the loudest I've ever heard that building. I think personally, having watched this team and covered this team for so long, and I just keep thinking about, you know, that sort of magical run in 2018 when they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I was like, oh my God, is this going to happen? And then all of the heartbreak for those players that it took over the past, 7, 8 years? I don't know. I can't do math right now, except for banner 18. Am I right? But I think that, like, being in that building and watching that, especially after I was in the building for the 22 loss, that, like, I was covering it. I was writing about it. I was on a deadline. So I sort of you have the fan you, the reporter you, and I was reporting. So I was up there, and it was amazing to watch Steph Curry, you know, Klay Thompson, Draymond win another one. But there was a part of me that I think died a little bit, where watching another team celebrate in your team's home stadium is like, and last night it was the opposite of that. And Jason Tatum talked about how much heartbreak it took to get there, how much, you know, I think Derek White even said in the press conference, he was like, you say we're not battle tested, like, were the last 2 years not enough for you sickos, basically? So the reaction in the Garden, I was very proud. I was very proud of the fans for keeping the energy up, because you might remember they were leaving early a couple weeks ago. So I was thrilled that it felt as big as the moment was in there.
So this was a team that was the best team in the NBA all year. All the books had them winning it and favored. They were doing everything from a favored standpoint. So what's the perspective of this team? This team, the players, they finally got their first one. I get it. But they were supposed to. So what does that do to the perspective of the 18th banner in Boston Celtic history compared to the others, and where this one could fit?
I mean, I think it makes it that much more both expected and impressive. Mazzulla says, you know, for all the weird stuff that Joe Mazzulla has said, his press conference last night was sort of, I came away from it being like, do I need Joe Mazzulla's quotes from his press conference on an inspirational poster? He said, you know, winning can be just as dangerous as losing. And our job all season was to figure out how to balance that and not get too high and not get too low. And he was also talking about the outside praise and criticism. He was like, praise is just as dangerous as criticism, and criticism is just as dangerous as praise. And you need both. Like, you need to hear both and then be able to exist in a space where both of those things are being said about you. And I've said this whole postseason run and for the whole finals, I think that this team's challenge, this team's job, was to be emotionally and mentally prepared for when they got here, and to not make those sort of less mature mistakes that they had made in the past. They didn't make them. Dallas just didn't show up, which is a whole other part of it. You know, we were sitting there and Amin was like, this feels like a January game. And so I think the fact that the Celtics did keep up that energy was great to see, because in the past that might have been a spot where it could have fallen apart, and it didn't.
So Dad asked where this Boston Celtics team ranks in terms of the championships in this franchise. But Charlotte, when we talk about that dominant run that you mentioned, and I think it's a great point where you think about what winning does, Dad. It's positive feedback and reinforcement for whatever you're doing. And this team was so talented and so deep, they were going to win some games before tip-off even started. And even a league in the pros where the talent gap is closer than college, closer than any other level, they were deep enough and strong enough and had quality enough players to where they were probably going to be able to roll out of bed some days and get this done. And sometimes that can reinforce bad habits. And that's why coaches love getting to coach after a loss sometimes, because then they get to come in here and finally take all of the criticism that they had while you were winning and get them with a little bit more bite, because now you've got that negative feedback. And so for them to never really do that with long stretches of losing is damn impressive. They go out there, they bulldoze everyone in the regular season, they bulldoze everyone in the postseason. Charlotte, should we be talking about this team in even more rarefied air? Should we be talking about this as one of the best championship teams in recent memory? Or is this where their path to the finals, their path through the postseason starts to rear its ugly head and we say, well, they never really got tested in any meaningful way, and that holds them back?
I mean, my problem with that is that the regular if they had not been as dominant as they were in the regular season and then had this stretch in the playoffs, you could say, okay, they got lucky. I don't know how to explain what they did in the finals except for game 4, which was like a weird blip that I would rather probably not talk about. From a fan perspective, from a basketball perspective, I was like, what is happening also? But I think you cannot say that this is not one of the greatest teams of all time. You just can't. Every championship that any team wins comes with luck. You hit something that another team didn't. You got lucky in a place another team didn't. You didn't get hurt where another team did. There is no way to have an even playing field or a control experiment every time you play. You can't go back and say, okay, well, you know, if we weren't at altitude, if this person didn't have the flu, there are so many little things that go into it that to start nitpicking and be like, you know, the Celtics, well, you know, they didn't play. Donovan Mitchell was out. Jimmy Butler was out. Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. Like, okay, that sucks. It would have been fun and probably made for a more competitive series if those guys had been healthy. I wish they had been, but this is how it goes in professional sports. It is so hard to win a championship. Like sitting there, being in the back and around the locker room, and not in it though. I will say I was not in it, but I tried, didn't get in. I think
not for like
we got a strong, ma'am, can I see your credential? And I was like, oh, I have the right marks. And they were like, no, you don't. And I was like, all right, well. But you know, I saw Drew Holiday with his kids. I saw Jaylen Brown taking pictures with Taco Fall, the Maine Celtics own, the Boston Celtics previous own. And it's impossible to say that what this team did wasn't absolutely mind-blowing. You see the fatigue on these guys. Honestly, guys, anytime anybody wins a championship, it sort of blows my mind because it feels like it should be impossible. And the relief you see on those players' faces, I don't think there's any way you can what if this playoff run and this finals run in this regular season. I think this team was absolutely unbelievable. And I think the fact that they didn't do it in like the sexiest or funniest or goofiest or most, you know, intense, or there wasn't one guy who was always going off in some, like they did it as a team. And that was their whole thing. They talked about, they won this as a team. They played as a team this whole season, this whole finals run, this whole playoff run. And I think that that's where things get lost from the outside, where you're like, well, nothing super flashy happened. And it's like, well, you know, maybe basketball's a team sport. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it is one of those things that the dominance in that way, and also the run in the NBA that we're on right now, 6 different year with a different champion, right, coming off of what had been that run back and forth between the Golden State Dynasty and the Cavaliers, and I think that's what colors so much of this, because you look at the most recent champions, Denver last year getting over the hump finally after Nikola Jokic had been such a singular presence, the Golden State Warriors in 2021-22, obviously the capstone of that core's championship window. But the Bucks, Giannis getting over the hump, the Lakers bubble championship, Toronto the year after LeBron James finally leaves the Eastern Conference and Kawhi Leonard helps them lift the trophy, coming off of that run from Golden State where it was so clearly best on best. We knew LeBron James was the best player in the NBA, and we knew Steph Curry's Golden State Warriors were the dynasty. I think outside of that, if you want to have a conversation post those two, because I think those two teams in particular, when LeBron was at the height of his power and when the Golden State Big Three was really up and hunting, and it was the Splash Brothers, those are probably the two best teams I think of in the last decade or so, right? Or at least the ones that come to mind the most readily because of the way they went through it. But amongst the last 5 or 6 years, this Boston team in terms of quality is going to be no one's second place. Well, they're looking eye to eye with pretty much everyone in that group.
I think they've got a great shot to go win a couple here. I mean, better than any other team in the NBA, right? We talk about how deep the West is and the battles they're going to have there. They're fighting in the East. I get it with Giannis and the Bucks. If Embiid can stay healthy with the 76ers, where the Knicks are going to be, but they're still the best team. And quite truthfully and honestly, they should have the best odds to win the title next year. But Charlotte, how about the unsung? Because they know within the community because he won Executive of the Year. But I have to remember Brad Stevens coached this team from 13 to 21 and basically stopped coaching at like 45 to become an executive. And built this team to the point where he traded for Al Horford, traded for Derek White, traded for Kristaps Porzingis, also got a couple of first-round picks, traded for Drew Holiday. Then it's about re-signing your own, re-signing Brown, re-signing Porzingis, re-signing Holiday. I hope, and as I said, he got Executive of the Year, so within the community, they understand what he does. But what he's been doing for a few years has been pretty impressive.
I mean, I think what I admire about the way that Brad Stevens built this team is I think that in a league where it's very easy to get swayed by what other people are doing or to have sort of a knee-jerk reaction or to try to overcorrect year to year, he had a vision and he executed that vision. And he did things when it was not. I mean, do you remember everybody being like, oh, split Tatum and Brown up. You got to split them up. And at the time, I was like, I don't think you do because I don't know what you can do that's better than that. I think maybe they just need some more time. What a concept. Brad stuck to that. He brought in guys like Drew Holiday. He brought in guys like Kristaps. He brought in the people he brought in this year wanted to be there. They were at the point in their career too, where there was a maturity level where Drew was like, I'll do whatever you need. I'm a utility guy now, which is crazy because he's Drew Holiday. Kristaps came in and, it wasn't even a conversation when he had to come off the bench after that injury with Missoula. He was like, sure. Okay. Like they had Derek White, who said he was shocked when Joe Missoula came in and was like, I'm going to start you. Like they had the right mix of personalities to do what they were trying to do, which was win in a very team-centric, earnest way. And I think the fact that Brad saw that in this group of guys and also managed to match the personalities with these insane skill sets that complemented each other, and then they didn't get in their own way was amazing. And so, yeah, Senior, I hope, I think he is getting a lot of recognition. I think people know what Brad Stevens did here. What I admire is the ability to sort of have a vision, stay focused on it, execute that, and then it pays off. And it doesn't always. Like you do need some luck. You do need those breaks. You do need shots to fall when they need to fall. But it's pretty cool, right? I don't know. It's sort of hitting me now as I'm talking, I think. I'm like, oh my God. I can't believe they did it. Like they did it. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown won a champion. That's the one everyone was like, well, they can't win a championship. And it's like, well, they just did. Now what? Now what are we going to do? Oh my God.
It is interesting what we're going to do with them because you're right. Breaking them up was sports talk radio fodder for years. Yeah. I was on the other side of that one, on the wrong side of history on somebody's reel. And now I think what happens going forward with them with the newfound confidence is going to be fascinating. But Charlotte, who's the Celtic you are happiest for on this team coming off of this championship?
I'm happy for all of them, but Big Al Horford, he's 38. He won a championship. All the guys up there after the game were like, we wanted to do this for Al. He's so delightful. He came in and like busted in. Derek White was doing his press conference and Al just busted in the door. He was like, my turn now. And he truly loves playing in Boston in a way that I think most people, it's very easy to say like, oh, I love playing here. It's the pressure is worth it. Like they expect things from you and you've got to give back to the front office and the fans. But Al says it and he actually means it. He loves this place so much. His family loves Boston so much that to see him get that win was just like, that's pretty, even if you hate Boston with your whole heart, I don't think you can hate the fact that Al Horford just won a championship.
186 career postseason games with 3 different teams. It's the most before a title. Before that, it was Gary Payton, who had played 152 postseason games before winning it all. So feel good for the guy. Just seems like a good dude and a great teammate.
Yeah, Jason Tatum said, that's my favorite teammate of all time. I can remember Al Horford playing at Florida when I was going on a visit there. So now to see him finally get over the hump to this point, an incredible part of this Boston Celtics story. Coming up next, though, I want to look at the future of what this Boston Celtics team, this Denver Nuggets team, and a few others might teach us about the coming years in the NBA. Next on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We got Charlotte Wilder hanging out with us today. You're going to be able to catch her over on the Dan Le Batard show as well this morning, reacting to the Boston Celtics championship here. And Charlotte mentioned it's the topic of conversation you're going to hear all morning. And I'm sure a bunch of highlight reels already being put together, old takes exposed of people from back years ago, Dad, wanting to break up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, despite the fact that Tatum's only 26 years old now, heading into what's usually the prime of an NBA career on a team that's incredibly deep, incredibly talented, and looks like they should be in this window for a while. But we thought that about the Denver Nuggets after last year, too, with Nikola Jokic. And so things can always change pretty quickly. But With that in mind, Charlotte, I was curious how you thought about this. And again, Charlotte Wilder, co-host of Oddball with me and El Hassan, talking NBA every day but Monday on DraftKings Network. As you guys sit and discuss the league now and the trajectory going forward, what we've seen from teams like Oklahoma City coming up and some of these young squads that are a little bit more maybe team defined than just one singular player, do you think we're now entering an age in the NBA coming off that player empowerment, player movement era where we're going to see more teams reward their stars with patience and try and keep these groups together the way that this Boston Celtics team did, the way that the Denver Nuggets last year did?
I don't know, because patience, Gojo, is very expensive. Patience requires an owner who says, sure, I will keep pouring money into this team. And you just take your time, coach. I'm going to let you stick around too. The fans are calling for your heads and mine as well. And you know what? Just ride it out. Like, I think it takes a certain kind of organization to say, no, I think this is it. And I think it takes the right combination of people. And I don't think that patience is going to become the next trend, as it were, because also that means like you got to pay everybody. Like, you know, you got to give out max deals. You still have to figure out how to make those pieces work together. So I also think it's funny because, you know, it still is star driven. Like, you have Tatum, you have Brown, they are obviously the names that people say the first thing they say when they talk about this team. I think it was more of the mentality that this team played with, the fact that they hung their hat on being a cohesive whole, that was interesting to me, while of course still saying like, oh well, it's JB and JT's team. So I would like to see that happen more, because I think it's really rewarding and really fun. And if you have the right people who can build that trust and that core together and then win, I think the winning is the key part, and only one team can do that. So I think there are going to be some teams where they're like, we've kept this core together, we've tried this, but like our timing just wasn't right because we ran into this buzzsaw in the West or this buzzsaw in the East. You kind of have to win for that patience to keep going eventually, you know?
Well, we saw with Golden State, right? I mean, with the NBA being one of the most complex cap tax things there is out there, Golden State was paying every tax under the
Sure.
sun. And to Charlotte's point, the owner was like, I'm buying into it. Let's keep, and listen, they got the hardware to show that there were some good moves, but at some time that runs out. You know, this year they're one of the play-in teams. They're paying a ton of money. We're talking about the big three finally splitting up. So there does come a time, but they were a team that said, we're buying, we're all in, and I'm going to spend the money.
And remember, Steph Curry was not Steph Curry right away either, and didn't cost them Steph Curry money right away either, but it took patience to work through the injuries in the early portion of his career and do that. I think Charlotte is right, though. It's going to be so case by case. I think a team like Oklahoma City does become one of the perfect early candidates for something like this. And a lot of that is market driven, too. Like, I think the reason this is so impressive from Boston Celtics leadership is because weathering the storm through your fan base's demands, through the pressure from the outside noise and the media, is a lot different there than it is in Denver. Like, I understand we came for Jokic because he was winning MVPs at a rate that people didn't think was commensurate to his championship acumen, but it's still not the same pressure out in Denver day in and day out from the media, from the fans, to go there and do something versus Boston, where you're going to hear that constantly, versus a team like the New York Knicks where you're going to hear that constantly, versus the Philadelphia 76ers who worked through the process era and now through this with Joel Embiid. All of those factors do make this, in my mind, even a tick more impressive that Boston was able to kind of block out all that noise and work through it from the organization side and the player side as well, because we've seen player egos, player desires, and demand also get in the way of stuff like this.
Well, this Charlotte is all up to the owner, right? I mean, this is Brad Stevens going to the owner and saying, okay, you know, Jason Tatum's got a $315 million extension coming up. We know we're going to do that. What are we going to keep doing around that? You know, are you willing to keep putting your name on the check?
Well, it's easy now because you have the hardware. I'm saying the hard part was before. It's, you know, faith is what? Belief without seeing. So you had to do that before. You got the championship now. Charlotte, I don't think there should be any worry about their desire to write checks now unless you get into the have your cake and eat it too mode.
No, and I think, you talk about a team like OKC where I think the unfortunate reality of this league is that for everybody playing in it is that for the most part, experience counts for a lot. And Vince Goodwill over at Yahoo Sports, amazing reporter, he asked the Timberwolves and was sort of laughed out of town. He said, do you feel like you haven't had the appropriate amount of heartbreak? And they were like, I think Kat was like, shoot or something like it. How much more do you want us to lose? We lost in the playoffs. And, Vince is sort of like, okay. And then they lose to the Mavs. And it's like, okay, that's step one. Like the Celtics, they lost a couple Eastern Conference finals. Then they get to the finals. They lose. Then they lose the Eastern Conference finals last year. Then they win this because they had been there before. Because when you get to that actual stage, when you get to the finals, it is loud. It is bright. I know Joe Mazzulla said that, unless they change the light bulbs in the arena, it's just another game. But like those lights are a little brighter. And so I think that the patience of having that core and keeping them together and letting them lose, that's what's so hard. You have to let your team lose to get, Denver lost in 2020. And I think everybody can only take so much losing. If the Celtics had lost this year, we might be having a completely different conversation. Yeah. But if you can weather that storm and you can see the potential in the guys that you have and in their ability to work through it together and just how committed they are to not losing again after they know what it feels like to lose, that's when you have something special. And I think that's what the Celtics saw in their core this year.
You mentioned one of the two teams, Dad, that I think are going to be the most interesting case studies of all this patience going forward. We mentioned Oklahoma City, but that feels easy right now because of what Oklahoma City's done to build it to this point. Minnesota's the interesting one to me. Karl Anthony Towns has been there. He's been the subject of trade conversation and buzz since they lost in this postseason, and they've got the pressure of Anthony Edwards, who feels like this burgeoning superstar. The other's the New York Knicks. This team was so beloved for their style of play. Jalen Brunson has made that push into superstar level here. Tom Thibodeau's a coach that we know. And will someone, especially in that market, in a franchise that historically has always grabbed for the shiny object and usually well after its prime when they have the chance, those two teams are the ones that are interesting of, hey, they seem like they're on the right path. There's parts of this that are new and still getting used to these stages in the postseason. How are they going to handle what they've got at their core going forward?
Yeah, that's when you disappoint the fans if an owner decides not to, right? To kind of say, you know what, I'm done with this. We're not going to continue, because you would think, I get you saying that's more difficult, but these are two teams you would think would keep building, right?
You would think, but James Dolan owns one of them, and we just saw Minnesota go through a very clunky power exchange in their own team and organization this past year, so none of that feels guaranteed. Especially in the New York media market with the Knicks. I mean, Tom Thibodeau, I basically said that, hey, look out, we could have Danny Hurley coaching the Knicks the other day. I was trying to do that.
Yeah, you did.
And you wonder all of a sudden what the patience will be like after another season in MSG if it's not another decided step forward.
Well, it depends, because Charlotte just ran through the litany of downsides for the Celtics, and now they finally got the payoff. So, again, it comes down full circle of what we were talking about. Where's your patience level? That says we need to build, even if it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but you get the payoff at the end like Boston just did.
We got the payoff for our buddy Charlotte Wilder. You check her out over in the Dan Le Batard Show coming up again this morning as well. Charlotte, thanks, buddy. Rest up and enjoy the championship parade. We'll see you in one of those duck boats.
Oh, can't wait, guys. I'll have a little rain suit on. I don't know why I said that. I'm tired.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Thank you to our friend Charlotte Wilder for joining us here on the show. And Dad, before we get to some college football, I saw an interesting question posed from our friends Maggie and Perloff over at CBS Sports Radio. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, often scrutinized in the lead up to this. Now they're champions. Jaylen Brown's the finals MVP. Are they the best duo in the NBA now? Now that they've got the hardware, we've seen them get over the hump here. Are they the best duo in the sport at this particular moment?
Well, I mean, I guess we start with who do we think is better? You know, where do you go? I mean, they just beat another power duo we talked about in Kyrie and Luka.
The highest scoring duo in the history of the NBA postseason in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic.
You got Joker and Murray in Denver. I mean, you have the old man and the big man in LeBron and AD.
Yeah.
But
you've got what? I guess at this point it would be in Milwaukee alongside Giannis. It would be Dame.
It would be
Dame and Giannis.
Right,
You would
Dame
probably
and
put
Giannis.
them there over Chris Middleton.
SGA and Chet Holmgren as far as a young duo.
Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid in Philadelphia would probably be in that conversation. I guess Kat and Anthony Edwards, would that be the duo in Minnesota for that team?
Yeah, I think it would.
It's interesting because my initial reaction was no when I heard this question posed.
Name the better one now.
That's the thing overall. And I think what Jaylen Brown's finals MVP has taught us is there was value placed on defense.
Yes, exactly.
And what this duo can do, especially Jaylen Brown on the defensive side of the floor, is noteworthy enough to be entered into this conversation. Claudia, I've seen your face mixed between curiosity and disgust during this conversation, so I'm curious where you fall here.
That's just my resting face because I didn't sleep. No. I didn't have that reaction you did. I think without a doubt they're the best duo right now. And that stat that we threw around heading into this postseason, the fact that they had 107 playoff games, the most of any duo in NBA history without getting a championship, and now they got the championship, the fact that they've been in whatever it is, 5 of the last 6 years, to the conference finals. They've done so much together, and I truly believe if they didn't have each other, they wouldn't be there to where all these other duos we talk about, like it's Luka or it's Kyrie, and very rarely did we see them come out together and have dominant games. It's almost like they pass the baton off to one another to where we had the conversation, is this Brown or Tatum's team? And in the end, we realized it didn't really matter, and Brown won finals MVP, but Tatum led in points, rebound, and assists for the team. So I think without a doubt, when it comes to dominance, what they did in the regular season, the consistency in the postseason, without a doubt, this is their league right now when it comes to duos.
I think you have to give it to them now because I can't. The one that just keeps coming to mind is Jokic and Murray.
Yeah.
Because coming off, they're winning last year, but then losing to Minnesota. But
that one also does feel very uneven. Like Jokic is doing a lot of the work in that. Jamal Murray's a very good player.
He is. So I'm trying to think what the next duo is.
I think this really, and we have these conversations a lot, this really puts the emphasis on duo. I think this is the best duo in the NBA right now, which is interesting because if you were then just drafting on singular stars, I don't know if either of these guys would be in the top 5.
Right.
Probably would struggle to be in the top 7 or 8.
And Jason Tatum would be the guy there because he's such an incredible athlete. I think he would be there.
He'd be the one you take, but I think if you were drafting individual stars then, because that's what we do have a lot of in the league right now is great stars with great ensemble casts on some of these teams around them.
I think that you just said it right there. I think they're the best duo, but they also have the best supporting cast.
Yes. Oh, they're incredibly deep and
from the intangibles, the defense you play, the diving for every loose ball, just all those things that you ask that a lot of times you don't have to ask, I should say, of a team. Players just do it because they want to do it. So I do think the supporting cast has been incredible.
Yeah, I think they've got guys that have complementary skill sets too. There's not a lot of redundancy. They've got a lot of great outside shooting and a lot of perimeter defense. Like the Boston Celtics, the fact that we're talking about Jaylen Brown's defense, the finals MVP, but Derek White and Drew Holiday were both all NBA defensive caliber players. Derek White, one of the best shot blockers in the NBA period, to go along with Al Horford, who's been that guy in that role for so long, what Kristaps did for that team. I think you're right in the ensemble cast, but this is, in terms of the strength of the word duo, they are a true example of the whole of this duo better than the sum of its parts. Because again, drafting on individual talent, I think these guys are in the top 10, but towards the back end of that. But in duos right now, they sit atop the NBA mountain. And I think there's very little disputing that at this point in time. Speaking of great duos, though, let's talk about a trio of duos that made the rounds yesterday. Usually when Notre Dame makes the news, I'm always a little nervous because we are not generally a school or a program of the football team that people like. They have strong feelings one way or another about us, and usually they're pretty negative, people yelling about us wanting to join a conference or something like that just because we're different. Yesterday, it was weird because it was like when Marcus Freeman took over and everyone was like, oh, man, he's so young and cool and everybody likes him. And I'm like, it's weird you're all talking about us positively in public. This picture that made the rounds yesterday of the former Steelers greats and their Notre Dame commit sons that even got the retweet from the NFL's main Twitter account, as you had Jerome Bettis, Ike Taylor, and Plexico Burress, all Steelers greats, especially in Jerome's case from kind of different eras in this, with all three of their sons that were commitments to Notre Dame here. You had Jerome Bettis Jr., the Notre Dame wide receiver, commit here. You had Elijah Burress, the 3-star wide receiver. And then you had Ivan Taylor, the 4-star defensive back commit for the Irish, all with their dads, all in blue, gold, and green in South Bend. Pretty cool moment.
So I've been fortunate the last 2 Saturdays to be part of the recruiting weekends.
How'd you do?
I think I did okay. Did
they commit on the spot?
Well, the thing about it is, and this is what you have to do now. Whenever you hear someone's committed, you're like, okay, cool, they're in the bank. That's not the case anymore. So most of the players the last 2 weekends were committed to Notre Dame, but you never know, right, if they're going to stay committed.
True.
So because I was talking to someone and they're like, yeah, we have a commit out there, a guy who committed to us visiting Alabama, another weekend. So you just don't know. First off, what made me feel real old, it's one thing when I saw guys from my era and their kids start to play. Yeah. These players are guys I covered after I was done playing, and now their kids are playing. So it makes me feel even older, but I got to talk to all those guys on Saturday and meet their sons. They were all out on the field. It looks like a hell of a class. Remember, this is for next year's class. This isn't this year. This is next year's class, and more than a few of them will be early enrollees. They'll come here in January. But I'd forgotten. I ended up talking to Plexico Burress for about 20 minutes, how big he is. Forgot that. It was a nice conversation with him for a bit. But just it's a cool thing. It was kind of like me and your ma when you and Jake and even Sydney, you live your dream out of playing where you want to play or go to that next level. You just see how proud the parent is, Jerome and Ike and Plaxico for their kids, that the moment is their kid. We're used to having the spotlight shine on us and then it gets to shine on your kid. And just what a great, proud moment that is. Not just for those guys. They're the ones known, obviously, but for all the parents that were there. They do a cool thing. They announce a kid's name and they run out on the field where their parents are. And you can just look at the parents and it gave me chills. It was cool to see how you're able to enjoy that. But yeah, getting 3 former Steelers kids.
Well, and we've got a fourth on the roster right now, Jordan Clark, Ryan Clark, former Steeler great. I saw Ike Taylor
from ASU.
His teammate basically said, we're mad at you for not holding our nephew back a year when he was growing up so that they could all run it back and play here together. But Notre Dame has quickly become the Pittsburgh of Indiana.
And listen, it's a testament to Marcus and the coaches. I mean, Marcus really dives into the recruiting, gets out there, gets his feet wet, his hands dirty and all this. The coaches do it as well. So, it's a credit to him and the staff and just how they're selling and telling everybody about Notre Dame and the greatness that you could have possibly here.
It better be a credit to you soon, because again, if you're going to be out at these recruiting events, you got to be a net positive. Back when I was on campus, we took great pride when we hosted a recruit, we brought them around campus and showed them around and they hung out with us. Our commitment rate was very high coming off of that because we like to think that we showed them a good time. We were a great hang with them. And so I need to see that energy from you right now.
Only thing I remember is when I hosted a recruit, they gave us $25 a day. We pocketed and took them to dorm parties.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. It's just with inflation, ours was a little bit more than that. I wonder what that's at now in the NIL era with all this.
I think it's $100.
Wow. Triple digits.
I think. Yeah.
Oh, my God. You 18-year-olds have no idea how valuable you were to us. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network if you can. If you miss us there, you can catch the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. And if you miss us there or any of our great guests, like our friend Charlotte Wilder, co-host of Oddball with me and El Hassan, who joined us for the second hour of the show, you can get that wherever you get your podcast or available right here. Excuse me.
All right.
As soon as we get off the air on YouTube. Choked up late night last night watching the game. I didn't ask for any of this. Let's get to this, guys. Speaking of things I did ask for. We had some footy on the television. Yep. In the last few weeks. Euro started this weekend, amongst other things here. And I actually forget what he was covering. But Landon Donovan wound up in the news a little bit. Not for anything he said or did, but in fact for his haircut here. He was covering and helping covering Euros on Fox and showed up with a very interesting haircut to get the internet talking. Now, I know this is the spot where I am supposed to remind Landon that it's okay to come on home, that the league, the Bald Brotherhood, gained a new championship member. Remember, Derek White was not capable of the things that he was this season on the basketball court until he decided to go and shave off what was left of his hair, come on and become a beautiful, proud, bald man who can now add NBA champion to his resume. But like with most instances, Dad, I'm never sure what everyone's got going on in the home life, never sure if this is connected to something else that looks pretty messed up. But I'm always going to wait and see, because the last thing I want to do is be on the wrong side of some headline about something weird he's got going on in his life or something potentially tragic there. So I'm going to back off and wait until I hear confirmation that this is in fact just some messed up haircut or a hair transplant gone wrong or something.
But either way, I mean, come on home, right? Would that be your advice to him?
In an ideal world, yes. Because he's also a guy who it's been trending that way.
Yes, it has.
And so unless you're going to have a few months off where you can disappear to Turkey and go get the work done that many of my friends in the balding community have done. I think that's the place where guys go for hair plugs.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's one of the one of those foreign countries where the laws are a little different.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, again, you're not on the message boards that we are right now, the bald Reddit. So you can you can see yourself out of this conversation here, muchacho. But listen, in an ideal world, when it starts to go, you either got to be proactive in one of two ways. You either got to be proactive, again, going and getting plugged up while you've still got some coverage there, so it's not painfully obvious. Maybe it just looks like you had a bad weekend, or you just got to, as someone that hung on too long the other way, you got to just shave it, go on home. Bald is a better look for most than they give credit for.
But that's the thing. I mean, that's a life change, right? Getting plugs or whatever, you continue to have hair that you kind of had, so you're living the way you did, but deciding to go bald it's a complete change, right?
It is a complete. But I mean, both of them are big, weighty.
But
undertakings.
one you had hair and you're kind of
one's a surgery though.
Right, I know, but you're keeping hair, so you kind of have the look that you had by continuing to having hair. The other is saying, all right, screw it. The hair's leaving, so we're just getting rid of all of it.
Quite honestly, in most cases, when you're going bald, it's one of those things people already knew, and it's not that big of a change. If you're thinking about doing that, it probably means
got to do it earlier, right?
Well, it probably means like me, you were rocking a pretty bad fairway up top anyway, and so you're not going to miss what was basically not
Took you too
there.
long to come home.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope everything's all right with Landon Donovan, and I hope that this ends up just being a very funny, bad haircut that we can all make fun of at a date where I'm more comfortable doing that. But in the meantime, anyone out there, if you need to hear this right now, you would look great bald. I think you should try it out right now. If you've been flirting with it, if you need someone in your life to come and give you that extra assurance, let it be me. Let me be the one. I want to service, much like my dad wants to go around and change people's air filters in their homes to make sure they're breathing clean air.
Yes.
If you need a friend to tell you and reassure you it's going to be okay if you go bald, at Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter, I got you.
So let me ask you a question. I could shave my head because it'll grow back. How do you think I'd look bald?
I mean,
because I got the beard, the gray beard and everything, and then if I went bald, Claudia, no, you're shaking your head, no?
I think the problem is, again, I rocked a buzz cut basically my entire life.
You did.
So I was already
except for freshman year at Notre Dame, your mugshot.
Yeah, a lot of curls, but you could see the bones there, so to speak. Right. I don't know what the bones look like if you got a weird shaped head or whatnot, and you have the backdrop of having this luscious hair your whole life. Yeah. So it would be very jarring. We need to do the bald cap.
It'd be wrong to get rid of it, right? To have a head of hair.
How did we just do that?
Wow.
How did you guys do that?
Let me tell you what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to shave my head.
I mean,
all right, we're going to get that one out on social media.
I don't think your head would be that swollen. You look like a Mad Max Fury Road
It
warlord.
does look like I got, cracked in the dome. What does that look on your face with hair?
That looks like
GoJo
me
has
with
no
hair
forehead.
letting out a fart.
Yeah, it does. It does. But
I look like some guy named Vinny.
Yeah, I'm not shaving my head anytime soon based on that picture. We'll get that picture out on social media.
Yeah.
Well done getting that done that quick.
Oh.
We'll get to our next topic here. Claudia,
Yeah.
let's get to that and some Colorado concert drama and away from that picture.
I'm like scarred right now. Deion Sanders, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but this is a report out by Athlon Sports that he required his team to go to the Lil Wayne concert. But the craziest part about it is the fact that Shedeur Sanders was opening, I guess, his rap debut. He was the opening act for Lil Wayne, so this is crazy. It was during the weekend of the spring game in April. It didn't set well, of course, with some players who spoke about it. The report said the Wayne concert was the final straw for a few players who hit the transfer portal. Coach Prime told us we all had to be there to support Shedeur as a rapper. They were not happy at all. To be honest, it was nothing but a huge distraction, and Daddy Ball was being played. Coach Prime, of course, denied the story. Other players downplayed its significance. I don't know, guys, but when I first heard this, I completely believed it, GoJo. I really did, and I still do.
I think that's the best sign of this story is that we were all like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense. Now, Deion said this is one of the best lies I've ever heard. God bless you, and I pray you sleep well tonight because we are loud Jesus. But no, it does seem very believable given what we've seen go on at Colorado. I wondered if and we saw Lil Wayne perform there on College Game Day earlier in the year. I did wonder if even in the modern times, Lil Wayne carried the same cultural cachet he did when I was in college. Because that would have been a sick ticket on campus when I was in school.
For you, it was Snoop.
For me, it was Snoop, but like Lil Wayne was in the prime of his career. Right. The Carter 3 came out my freshman year. That would have been huge. And quite honestly, if Shedeur did open up for Lil Wayne, that's pretty sick. The closest I got with that was we had one of our teammates, my running back Jonas Gray, opened up for Dustin Diamond in a comedy set at CJ's Pub in downtown South Bend. That's the closest we got.
Yeah, that's it's pretty good for Shedeur. Obviously, with Deion, you had that kind of cachet to be able to get in that position. I don't buy this as far as him mandating it. And there were reports he was saying it would cost you if you didn't. I don't believe any of that. There's a few players that came out and said it wasn't like that. I could see how it was. Hey, your teammate is going to open here. You know, it would be a good sign of support to go there. Me personally, I know there's been a lot of stories coming out of Colorado, what Deion has done there. I don't believe that he mandated.
What if it was air quotes voluntary?
Well, it forced fun.
Air quotes fun, air quotes voluntary. Like, hey, you don't have to be there, but
it'd be really good if you were there.
It'd be a hell of a lot cooler if you did.
Yeah. I could, where you feel, all that you need was you feel that it would be held against you if you didn't go.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So, no, it'll be very interesting. Again, the Colorado experiment rolls into another season. Claudia, let's get to the third, speaking of someone rolling.
Yeah, the Joker, probably the happiest he has been in years. Not winning the NBA championship, no, but his horse, Amsterdam, recently won a race in Serbia. He celebrated the win with fellow Serbian NBA player Bojan Bogdanovic, and smiling ear to ear, as he would, of course, because the second he won the NBA championship a year ago, he said, cool, I want to go back home to my ponies. And one of them won. So that's happy for him.
Do you also see the picture of him dancing again out in the club, back to his normal postseason?
Yeah.
And only him, right? He's in a tank top, shorts, and flip flops with his kid on his shoulder, standing next to his winning horse.
I mean, that's got to be the happiest he's been in his entire life, right? Right
without
there.
question.
The NBA Finals, the Finals MVP, all that stuff is great, but we know the guy really just does get down with horse stuff, and so I'm happy for him. I love to see people live out their dreams.
I'm with you. He looks like he's having an absolute ball, so kudos to him.
It's also an amazing reminder of what a giant he is, because he's standing next to an actual horse and looking down on it. That is a good reminder that his better is better than our better in a lot of ways, and he gets to add championship trophies in multiple parts of the house now with his favorite teammate of all time, horse. Shout out to Nikola Jokic. Shout out to Amsterdam for going down and holding it down there. Shout out to all you guys, man. We survived it and made it through another day here. Our friends in Boston, enjoy that championship hangover this morning. Sober up and get ready to do it all again for the parade. And download, subscribe, rate, review us in the meantime while you're on your way over there. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.